Welcome back. Very important conversation today. We're going to talk about the regular day in the office to achieve 200 visits a week or even way more than that. And so if you're already at 200 visits and you're pushing to get to 300, 400, 500, 600, 1,000, all of these principles remain and are critically important. The system is set up basically to see amounts of people per day, per week, per month that you'll probably, there's an infinite capacity. But if you're not at consistently 200 visits a week, it's a great vision. I want all of my clients to be focused on that. And so hence the title. In addition to that, to start, there are two administrative issues. One is there's a new email security feature, and it is unclear to me if somebody in the chat or if you could even chime in. Do all first of all employees can have their own login to either the DC training and or the CA trainings on my trading dashboards. In addition to that, when you're in my system, you will then get emails from me, including the invitations to my weekly trainings, including this one. And so last week, it was unclear whether every employee got the emails. And so I'm asking again, if you got the emails for this week. And I got to find there's my chat. And so if you did, you can just say yes. And if you did not, you could say no. The second issue is, if those of you that are observant, there is an error on the front desk dashboard. And if you go to the year-to-date tab, the July numbers are duplicate from June, and that's because of this error. And so if you go to the year-to-date tab, and then you go into each cell for July, you will see that it is labeled June. And so you just need to change the JUN to JUL for each of these cells. And
you're not showing us. We see the PowerPoint.
Really? Okay, thank you. How about this one? There we go. So when you go into the year-to-date tab and you go to July, not there, but here, on each of these cells, it is currently labeled June, right? And so you just basically change the N to an L and it fixes that, but you do need to do it for each cell going across, which is a little bit aggravating, but not the end of the world. And so once you do that, the duplication from June to July will be fixed. I think this is the quote sign here. Let's see if that fixes it. Anyhow, I won't save that, but you get that. All right. I'm in some death loop here. Okay. So let's just take this out altogether and I will deal with it later. And so we're going to go back and we're going to revisit now.
One of the things this lady said today is, I said, well, when they hit that,
hang on,
the contact page, she goes, then they'll either call or they'll fill out the form. I said, or they'll bounce, right?
All right. And so we're going to visit the regular day in the office, which is a critical issue. As I said at the beginning, I title it for 200 a week, but, it would really be designed for any volume. And so I've had clients that well over 700 a week. It's the same principles. If you've been around me for a while, you've probably heard me do this presentation. And like any repeat presentation, what I'm really looking for you to do is to find the 1, 2, 3 things that can improve the daily visits in your office, the regular day in the office for the whole team in your practice. So at the end, when I ask for the homework, I'm looking for both the low-lying fruit, what are the easy things to fix, as well as maybe the aspirational, if you've been working on something that's bigger and like now's the time to implement it, I'm interested in hearing about that. And so again, it's designed for 200 a week or 100 a day. And conceptually, the first thing that I like to discuss is how I set up my appointment book. And so first, this is a picture of what is the big paper appointment book, which I am still a fan of. One of the reasons, the biggest, well, there's several reasons that I'm a fan of it. One of the big ones is on a computer screen, no matter how many visits you have in, how many little number of visits you have in, it looks busy, right? You could have 18 people listed for the day and it looks like you're swamped. On the big paper appointment book, you could have 200 visits in for the day and there's still room for more. And so it creates this success psychology of always room for at least one more. And again, just to be clear, I am a fan of having all future appointments in the computer. In the olden days, you used to have to write it into this book and flip the pages, and it took forever. And then when somebody wanted to change from morning to afternoon, you had to erase 36 visits and put in a new set of 36 visits. And I'm certainly not a fan of that. However, to run the current day, one of the tasks, typically the front desk does, either at the end of the previous day or the morning of the current day, is the writing in of all the appointments. And it's a second thing that I like about the paper appointment book is that there is a connection when you're writing in each of the names. It gives us those several seconds to think about the person, sending out vibes both for them to continue their progress, as well as if there's anything administratively that we might need to deal with that person, we can make little notes. I set up my appointment book in 30-minute chunks. And so sometimes this is a departure. I've had doctors, 15-minute chunks or even 7.5-minute chunks. Or I've even had docs that try to create 3-minute chunks. And so people could be scheduled at 11:12 a.m., for example. And I would just tell you now, as a patient for well over a decade, shooting for a half-hour slot is much easier than shooting for any time slot less, even 15 minutes. And so in my 30-minute chunks, each chunk can be one of 3 different things, right? One is regular office visits. And so this is the first thing that I'd like you to review as a team in each of your offices is comfortably, how many patients can be seen in your office in a solid 30-minute regular patient visit chunk. And so this depends on several factors, the technique that the docs use, how many docs are in the practice, and even how many tables that you're adjusting from. But, in order to do 200 a week comfortably, you should be able to see 6 or more patients in 30 minutes. And, that gives you 5 minutes to do a full office visit, greeting the patient, checking the patient, adjusting the patient, releasing the patient. And again, if you had 8 of those chunks during the day, right, that gives you 48 regular visits in just 4 hours. Right? And so if you can see 50 people 4 days a week, you're at 200 people a week. A 30-minute chunk can also be used for a special, and we'll talk about more about each of these in a moment. Or I'm a big fan of building in 30-minute administrative chunks at least 3 times a week, right? And so that we have dedicated 30-minute times where all staff members can get all of the voluminous, all of the volumes of paperwork and responses and texts and emails and everything that we need to get done, right? We want to make the regular office visit, routine for as high a percentage of visits as possible. And then also identify and be able to handle the non-standard as opposed to routine visits. And we want to recognize the fact and build in some extra features that it is repetitive. Again, I was talking, I guess on Thursday, or I always talk about, right, that in practice, we're the most brick and mortar business that is left out there, right? While Dr. Sid, when I was at Life, and by the way, In 3 days. It'll be 38 years since I graduated. And so a shout out to the class of June of '86 at Life was college, now university. But, Dr. Sid was in his prime when I was there, and he would show up and speak at the Thursday assemblies quite frequently. And one of his favorite stories that I heard several times was how he adjusted the cross-eyed boy through the television set, and those boys, that boy's eyes straightened out. And like, I've always raised an eyebrow to that story. I'm basically a non-believer in that, but it just reinforces that we cannot adjust through the television set, and that we are brick and mortar, and that our gift is actually putting our hands on our patients. And so because of that, we hope to have many office visits for each individual patient. As I said, this is the big paper book. It should be able to fit comfortably at the front desk. I want to run the current day off of the appointment book. There, not this exact one, but ones that can handle, well over 100 names are available on Amazon relatively cheaply. We used to have to get these custom printed. And this whole book, which was big and heavy, the morning is on the left, the afternoon is on the right, and this is 6 months worth of appointments. So there was 2 for every year, and then when they were done, they ended up in storage, and then we had the big bonfire, which was throwing the stuff in the dumpster, where I had, 15 years of these appointment books, 30 of them that we sent for destruction. The next thing in the daily routine is both the powwow, the daily stand-up meeting, and then particularly if you haven't grooved it in yet, is for you to perform, or for there to be performed, typically either by the senior doc or by the real office manager, the pre-powwow, the pre-powwow check-in, right? And so that we prep every employee so that they can attend the powwow most efficiently. And so we want to make sure that they understand the agenda. We want to check their daily 6 so that during the powwow, when each employee checks in with their daily 6, it's bang, 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 right? There's not the long story. There's here's what I'm doing, and it is specific. It is for that day. It is the important things for that day. And so calling all the missed appointments, which is a very important task. If your front desk CA just says that every single day, I don't feel that that's as strong as when, Mary Smith, who's made her first 16 appointments and misses appointment 17, and we didn't get in touch with her, it might be super appropriate to have, I need to really contact Mary Smith. She missed yesterday, which was very rare for her. And so that would be appropriate to have on the daily 6. So we do the pre-powwow, and then the powwow, the stand-up meeting. And again, my agenda for that is to review the appointment book for the day, notice where we have people. Could we tighten up the appointment book, right? If you're still growing, and sometimes even in bigger offices, I would much rather have full 30-minute chunks than, so if you had 8 people in the morning scheduled, I would much rather than be 1/2 hour, all 8 people, than to schedule 8 individual times for the 8 appointments. And that applies for 25, or if you have 100 a day. And so look, where can we tighten it up? Where are we going to be, busy? What does prime time look like? Who's up for a re-exam? Who mentioned somebody about referring somebody or referring us to an event or to an organization, or who needs to make a payment that day? And so we can make all the notes that we need to make to set up for the day. We're going to review all the day 1 and day 2s since the last stand-up meeting, so that all staff members can hear who the new patients are, where they came from, what symptoms they presented with, what were the standard and even abnormal findings, what recommendations are we going to give, and then on day 2, what recommendations did we give, what was the patient's response, did they map out and agree to pay and schedule, did they do something less than that, did they decline care? And so everybody can communicate, and so nobody gets lost in the new patient processing, right? I want to know what got done yesterday from each staff member, both from their daily 6 yesterday, as well as from either our written plans for marketing, for retention, for collections, or even our assumed unwritten plans, right? I ran the accounts receivable yesterday and identified the 12 files that we need to work on. I did reach Mary Smith and got her rescheduled for this afternoon from her missed appointment yesterday. I contacted the nurse at the school. We set up a meeting for next Wednesday where we're going to organize the health fair, on the teacher in service day in August, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to do, again, as I said earlier, each staff member should be able to rapid fire their daily 6 most important tasks. And there should be an asterisk there. Again, as I said, there are standard routine tasks that can be very important, right? And so again, contacting all people that miss an appointment is a standard routine and it's very important, but it's not the daily 6 of specific tasks, that are high priority to get done today. And then the last piece is do a bit of success psychology, a visualization, a goals, a training, a chiropractic philosophy, a case story, new research. And so this whole thing should be 7 to 15 minutes, after which we unlock the door. And so unlocking the door is something to discuss, right? Yesterday I was I'm in Buenos Aires, by the way, and we're really enjoying it. I highly recommend it. It's one of my new favorite cities in the world. It is, further south than Sydney, Australia, so it's far away, but we are enjoying it. I went to a restaurant that opened at 9 a.m. for breakfast yesterday and was standing outside at 2 minutes to 9. And so they unlocked it and they opened the door. It was 9:05. I still waited an extra 2 minutes before I walked in and sat down. And it took them an extra 10 minutes to wait on me, and then an extra 20 minutes for my avocado toast with 1 egg on it. And while it was super tasty, I shouldn't have been out at 10 o'clock when it's clearly listed and they unlocked the door at 9. Similarly, right, I practiced in the inner city in Western Pennsylvania, which was the second oldest by population county and only to Florida. And so no matter what time I unlocked the door, my seniors would be there 20 minutes earlier. And so there was this kind of juggling that went on, and I'm of mixed emotions about it. But, I like to unlock the door a couple of minutes before the posted hours. In the winter, I'm a little more lenient when it was brutally cold out and they were just standing and waiting. I still like to do the stand-up meeting as a team at the front desk and prefer for patients not to be there. But it's this trade-off. And so whenever you do unlock the door, though, I want to have it scheduled. I typically will schedule regular patient visits right off the go so that we have the morning rush. And so we had 9:30 posted as our starting time, and we had unlocked the door by 9:25. By 10:30, Dr. Jeannie and I, we would be well over 20 visits in the first hour between the two of us. And so your day is already made by 10:30, right? For all staff members, docs on down, right? I want the priorities to be clear. 1, is anybody in front of you, top priority. 2, is individuals through phone, text, email, or any other way, smoke signals that you might need to follow up with. 3rd is all the administrative work. And so this could mean that, you're on the phone or you're searching something on the internet that is tedious, or you're on hold for 18 minutes and somebody actually picks up to deal with you. And as a new patient is walking in, and my priority would be to pass on the 18-minute whole phone call and to take the new patient or even an existing patient as the top priority. So this is an important slide to be thinking about. People, live people, not live, and then all the administrative work. Third, the time of your life. And so this is another great exercise to do with your team. What does your ideal day look like? And again, there should be one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And so again, we had 8 when we unlocked the door, and then a special, 8 at 10, and then a special 8 at 11, and then 2 marketing new patients at 11:30, and then 8 more at noon, and then a report of findings 12:30, and then we go to lunch at 1, which is another whole concept. I like going from lunch to lunch from 1 to 2:30 for many different reasons. One is it allows all of the workers near your practice to access you during their lunchtime from 11 to 1, right? So 11 to 12:30, 11 to 12:45, they can access your office. 2 is when we go to lunch, we can then be out both having lunch and running any of our errands during non-lunch prime time. And so I'm a big fan of seeing patients through till 1 and then taking lunch 1 to 2:30 or 1 to 3. And in this case, right, so we have room for 8, 16, 24, 32 regulars, and then 5 specials. So 38 total visits in the morning. And if we'd replicate that in the afternoon, that puts us at 76 total visits in a day. And so, you can even see 300 on just 3 days a week, but you can even see 500 seeing 75 5 days a week. That might be a little short, but you can do it, right? Again, lunch is typically a longer split. And so sometimes this is an issue with staff and with hiring. Sometimes you can get around it by having a morning person and an afternoon person. I do not like that as much as having full-time employees and, having the 1.5 or 2 hour break where everybody can rest, get lunch, exercise. If they want to train or learn or even, work on something not work related, they have a chance to do that, right? I believe that both that having that balance and getting out of the office, even if it's just going for a walk around the block, it's important for your mental health. And so getting all of that done to be back at work, back on your post with, time to speak of for the afternoon start. And so looking at your lunch could be a takeaway for today's talk. Here's the afternoon, 8, 16, 24, 32 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 more. So that gives us 38 in the afternoon. And right, prime time, I would have either back to back or even back to back to back, 3 half hours, 90 minutes of regular patient times, at least 3 afternoons a week of prime time. And ideally, it's filled up with patients that need to come during prime time. So typically we're talking after work. And so we're talking about people that do work. And, it's one of the elements of being an ideal patient, typically, is that, they have a job and some way to pay, right? And so really looking to both create, reinforce, and expand your prime time. And we'll talk about prime time in a second. So what does 200 visits a week look like in your practice? 55 on Monday, 45 2 other days. Let's call it Wednesday and Thursday. 25 on Tuesday afternoon and Friday morning. And you get to, over 200 a week. Close those and then let me, right. I'm still a fan of a couple hours on Saturday. I think that, if you're just starting Saturdays, I would schedule all regular visits at the same time, whatever time you want to go in, 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever time it is. And I would schedule all of them at that one time until it was too busy. And then I would schedule the next 30 minutes and I would build it out that way. I would schedule new patients or reports either before or after that one time. But, you know, again, you can definitely see 200 a week comfortably, one doc, two CAs, maybe even one doc, one CA, with this type of format. And in fact, you can see 70 a day so that you can see 200 in just 3 days a week if that was where you were, you know, laser focused on. 500 a week, what would that look like in your office? And, you know, if you've never really thought about 500 a week, if, you know, you've been in practice a while and you've reached 200, and even if you're at 200 stably, I would encourage you, what would it look like in your office to see 500 a week? And so typically it's 125 or more on Monday, 84 other days, and maybe 50 on Saturday. But what would it look like in your office? And just having that, and again, if you're at 500, what would 700 or 800 look like in your office? And it's, again, a great expansive exercise to do with the team. And so if 500 is like too much, what would 100 visits more than what your current average weekly volume is? What would that look like in your appointment book? What would your days look like? Could you handle that? And if the true answer is no, I would really encourage you to work on that so that every staff member knows that the real answer is yes and is even desirous of it. And that's a whole separate topic that I'll leave for a minute. All right. So going from setup to actual patient visits, right? And so I call this slide Dancing with the Stars. And so when it was super popular, right, you know, there are 6 or whatever official ballroom dances, the waltz, the tango, and all of the other dances that have official steps that make those dances. And I want to have official steps for our normal patient visit, right? Dozens a day, hundreds a week, thousands a month, tens of thousands a year, hundreds of thousands a decade, millions over a career. Think about that. How many regular, normal patient visits will be conducted in your practice, you know, during the length? So, you know, my big practice still going. Dr. Ron is still, you know, successful on the south side of Pittsburgh. Again, in July, we'll be starting year 39, right? And so it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of visits. And so going through all of these, first is each individual patient is mapped out, multiple appointment plan, MAP. Meaning that our job as the doctor is to determine what's best for each individual patient. We then tell the patient what that is, and provide a pathway for them to say yes. When they do say yes, we then want to schedule out their visits. And so in a normal structural chiropractic biophysic practice school of thought, a typical care plan would be 3 times a week for 12 weeks. Your practice might differ a little, but just using that as a standard. And so on day 2, I'm going to, you know, explain to the patient, here's what we found, here's what's best for you. And when they say yes, it's Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 4:30. We're putting them into prime time. They're going to come in on their way home. We also want them to either prepay their out-of-pocket or agree and go on an auto pay so that we only sell the patient one time. They don't need to be worried about money on every visit, and we can focus on delivering the care that is necessary for them to get whole and healthy again, right? So, so they're mapped, and they're mapped into one of the blocks. We want to greet the patient by name, and that's an important task. Again, in my early days, there used to be something called Polaroid cameras. And so you take the picture, the thing spits out, and it would develop in your hands. And I would take a picture of each new patient and put it on a bulletin board. And the bigger reason that I did it for was for me to help me learn and remember every patient by name. And ultimately, I had like 8 gigantic bulletin boards with thousands of pictures, and those also went into the dumpster one day. But each patient comes in and we greet them by name. And again, my generic rule of thumb is anybody that's older than me, which is less than it used to be, or if they have some professional designation like doctor or an attorney or some type of clergy person or a politician or anything like that, if I would greet them by Mr. or Mrs. last name or by, Officer Smith, right? If they were a police person, right? If they're younger than me, I would typically greet them by first name. I want them to sign in with paper and pen. If you have a digital kiosk, I think that's good enough as well, but I'm still a fan of paper and pen. It does several things. One is their own signature is bulletproof documentation. And so a handful of times in my career, it became a question in legal and in insurance billing world of was the patient even there? And so when you have their hand signature that they signed in, it ends that like you can't. It's as good as proof as there is. But there's a second reason. You can kind of get it from this picture. My typical sign-in form had room for 90 names, and so there were essentially 9-10 people blocks. And so just looking at this, right, there was roughly 47 people signed in here on this page. And so, I could walk by the front desk and just with a quick scan, know how many people we've seen at that exact moment during the day, right? It also allows us to create either a little piece of education. You could have printed on your sign-in sheet a piece of did you know? All right, and you have a 2-sentence, did you know? Or, you could have a promotion for PAD coming up or the new patient orientation coming up or to get onto the new email list, right? And the paper sign-in sheet is still HIPAA compliant and you don't need to white out each name as they sign in and it's totally fine. Next is the transferring of, again, I'm a fan of the paper travel card, but it can also be the digital registration. And so this allows us to do any administration that we need to do to handle any kept appointment situations. And so if the patient's 3 times a week for 8 weeks and they missed their last visit, right? If they had not already rescheduled, the missed appointment tag should be paper clipped to the travel card. And this gives the front desk CA a second opportunity to get the patient to schedule to make up for the visit. And this is a cultural thing started, leading with your docs down through the practice. Is a patient missing an appointment okay? And I'm going to strongly argue no. And so the classic chiropractic explanation for this is if you were building a house and you skipped every 3rd block of the foundation, it would dramatically weaken the structure of the house. And so we are doing typically restructure work with patients' spines and nervous systems. Missing 1/3 of the visits gives them just as an unstable base. So we want to check all that. Is there any insurance or other financial? Is today the day they're supposed to pay us? Is there any other administrative thing that is in limbo? Paperwork, referrals, promotion? Is it their birthday? Is there some acknowledgement? Is today a re-exam? Anything that's not a regular visit to highlight and that we're ready for. And then again, the last thing that I really like is the patient records their symptomatology either on a 0 to 10 scale, or it could even be higher than 10. If 10 is when they started, headaches, neck pain, low back pain. And so when they started, it was a 7, a 6, and a 4. And so on each visit, they would record how they are. And if they were actually worse, it could be higher than when they started or even higher than a 10, right? And so, you know, if they started at an 8 and they're now an 11, that would be something that I'd want to know and deal with, right? And so the travel card. I have a whole presentation just on this slide, but again, reinforcing the one-stop front desk. And just like it says, on a regular office visit, right? 50 to 100 a day, 200 or more a week, 1,000 or more a month, 10,000 or more a year, 100,000 for a decade, million for a lifetime. Patients should stop at the front desk one time. They come in, they sign in, we give them their travel card, we confirm the next appointment, we handle any missed appointment issues, we collect the payment, any other communications notes and tags that we need to have, and the patient records their symptoms, and we route the patient, right? And so if you're one-stop, you know, even being maniacal about a one-stop front desk, which I am, probably 25% still end up stopping more than one time. But if your routine visit is for patients to stop on the way in and on the way out, and you see 200 visits a week, the front desk is seeing close to 500 visits a week because people will also stop in between, right? And so that's something to really work on, and you can free up a lot of administrative time by really instituting a one-stop front desk. Again, if I asked you how your one-stop front desk is, if it's lower than an 8, it should be one of the things that you're focused on from today's presentation. When we route the patient back, the question is where do they go? And so again, this depends on how your doctor wants it and what the physical space in your office is. I'm a big fan of jump seats. I didn't have an open area like this. I had a tighter hallway, but we had 3 adjusting rooms, and then an exam report of findings room. When we were super busy, we could use as a 4th room. And then we had no doors, or we had actually pocket doors, but typically the doors were left open. And then we had 5 jump seats in the hallway. And so I prefer jump seats rather than patients waiting out at reception. However, if they have to in your office, you know, it's certainly workable. You can see 200 or 500 or 1,000 a week doing that as well. But I like having jump seats. And so patients don't really wait at reception, right? I would create enough so that you have a full, you know, your full 30-minute batch. If you have 8 people scheduled for 30 minutes and you have 3 adjusting tables, you need 5 jump seats. So the first 3 in go on the 3 tables, the next 5 go on jump seats. We actually teach people to kind of recognize, you know, who was there before you got there, and then you're now next, and we typically will go in order. We want to make it easy feeding onto the adjusting tables, and ideally, right, well, the next slide is to pick up patients the way that you want them. Well, it's going to be the next slide. While I never practiced in open adjusting like this, I am a big fan of open adjusting. You should have a private room for anybody that needs it, either regularly or on a special occasion. If any patient ends up wearing something inappropriate, all right, I would take them into a private room if it was necessary. And again, I would then teach them to wear more appropriate clothing when they come in. If you have any concern about this, I would encourage you to visit, instead of the pharmacy to see all of the prescriptions waiting to be picked up, I would encourage you to visit the biggest physical therapy practice in your area. And so I ended up practicing 10 blocks from the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center sports medicine physical therapy facility. And I actually was a patient there for about a month, and they have literally 50 tables that are being monitored, not by physical therapists. The physical therapists are back in the administrative office where you don't even see them, but they're being monitored by physical therapy assistants that aren't even really licensed, but like that was the setup. And so typically speaking, being able to practice an open adjusting creates a lot of positive energy. You know, you want to keep private conversations private, which you can still do in an open adjusting area, but we can see a higher number of people. And again, it becomes party time when you're super busy. It's a positive vibe, not a negative vibe. Your regular turn, right? And so so the CBP protocol is EAT, exercise, adjust, traction. And so I am a big fan of that. However, if you're not doing that, right, if that's not your model, then I think that the patient should be adjusted first. If the doc's swamped and you want to then put them on therapy first, so by the time they're done with therapy, the doc will be ready for them, that's fine too. But what I want is, I want the patient waiting on the doc. I do not want the doc waiting on the patients. And so for each individual visit, we can teach patients to be where we want them to be to start the visit. And so if you want them face down on the table with their travel card, you know, either on a ledge or outside the room or wherever you want it, or if you bring it up on the computer screen, we teach them to do that. And so even if you could teach patients to be face down and to do pre-adjustment exercises to loosen their spine so that they're still exercising. We're going to then adjust and then do any kind of traction or other therapy after the adjustment. I think that it's important to recognize and address symptoms when it's appropriate, but not to focus on them and on every visit. If the patient makes a symptomatic improvement, I want to acknowledge it. If they do not make a symptomatic improvement, right? If we're 2 weeks in and they're the same numbers or even worse, I want to acknowledge it and have a conversation, right? But I don't want to have the whole visit centered around how are you feeling today? And so it's one of the reasons that we have the patients fill in how they're feeling so that we don't need to start each visit with how are you feeling today, right? We want to do the pre-adjustment check on whatever your technique calls for, and then do the most important thing of everything that I talk about, all of the promotion and retention and getting paid and success psychology, the adjustment, the way that we get people better in a way that nobody else can, right? And so we want to deliver, for those of you that are philosophy-based, the adjustment with something extra, right? So docs, we want to be present time. We want to be tuned in with the patient. We want to make sure mechanically our lines of drive and our leverage is proper. We want to be able to deliver with the least force possible, the most effective adjustments, right? And so if you're not an 8 out of 10 on this, focus on that first, docs, right? After the adjustment, we want to do our post-adjustment checks. And during the whole time, Dr. Fred Barge, who I got to meet several times, wrote a book called You're the Doctor, Doctor, or Be the Doctor, Doctor, right? And so we want to be the doctor. And so like when the patient, I don't think you got it, doc, or what about the other side? Or, you know, even talking about the Steelers or the Pirates or your sports teams or what's going on, I want to have that minimized. I want the office visits, right? This is one of the keys of delivering the most effective, not kind of most, the most effective 3 to 5 minute office visit is for the doc to be present time, to do the pre-adjustment check, to deliver the most effective adjustment, to do their post-adjustment check to make sure, to do a little piece of education or motivation, confirm the next appointment, and then we're done, right? So that moved just great. Right? As you remember, when we're adjusting you, we're trying to free the nervous system so that the brain can coordinate all activities in your bodies even better. I like the way you're progressing. I'll see you on Wednesday. And then either you step out to go into the next table or room, or the patient gets up and they're either done and leave, or they go to do post-adjustment traction or therapy. I'll get to that. Again, I've talked about this. I think that there are, so there's rooms, bays are open. And so the bottom picture is a private room. Sorry. The middle right picture is open. The upper picture are T-bars, and that's a great compromise. And so above the adjusting table, it are traction chairs. And so the patient goes right from the adjusting table to the traction chair. The doctor has an eye on 2 adjusting tables and looks like 2 or 3 traction chairs. And then the left-hand picture are half walls. And so this is a compromise between fully open. And if you're still in individual rooms, I would encourage you to have one room with the door and to remove the doors off the other private rooms. Right. And so I've worked with several docs that like to shut the door on every visit, and those visits tend to take longer, and I don't think it provides better care. Doc, I would empower your team to allow them to time you. Right. And so what I want you to do is to take the time necessary to do the visit that you need to do. So it's not really about setting a world record of, I did an office visit in 42 seconds, but it's knowing that you're taking 7.5 minutes to deliver the 3.5-minute visit that you want to deliver. And oftentimes, and doing so for day 1 and for day 2, how long does it actually take you? Right? And sometimes the docs don't know staff members. And so being able to inform them, and then this is also something for all new docs and all typically associate docs, getting their timing down to what's appropriate is a learning curve that you need to know about. And so again, I want you to do everything that's necessary to take care of the patient on any individual visit. And so if something is odd and it takes you double time on that visit, you should take the double time. But by the same token, if something's not odd and they got the killer adjustment in 2.5 minutes, the patient got what they needed. The patient's going to be happy. When you're a patient, all you want is the good adjustment and you want to get out, right? Don't get your personal needs met during a regular office visit. Socializing, becoming friends, talking about the weather, and all that other stuff. Work to reduce and pack the number of regular patient times that you had. As I said, if I only had 8 visits scheduled for the day, I'd have them all scheduled in one 30-minute chunk, and then I'd spend the rest of my day trying to have more people scheduled tomorrow so that I needed 2 chunks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and that could take 16 people. Right. And then I'd spend the rest of the day after that 1 hour of seeing 16 people, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 in the afternoon, to make sure that I had more the next day. Right. And, if you don't have staff do it, time yourself. How many people can you see in 30 minutes? The adjustment, as I talked about, present time consciousness, visualize the contact, the line of drive, the dynamic thrust, the torque that you need or don't need. And again, here's my standard. Any chiropractor, big guy, little female, anybody in between, should be able to adjust any segment in any vector or direction needed on any patient. And then also know on any given day when it's not going to happen. Again, we're not only brick and mortar, but we're highly energetic. And in fact, it's one of the reasons that we'll lose some people is that the energy bond between us and individuals is not correct. It's another reason to have an associate because, 2 docs won't have the exact same energy and will bond differently with people. And so it expands the number of people that you can bond with. But there will be days, even with patients that you're highly there's high affinity with, where it's just not going to go. And being the doctor, knowing that, being okay with that. And again, if it's every visit when you need to adjust T2 in a certain direction, or L5 on a side posture, or however you adjust it, then you should address your adjusting skills. But when you're proficient, there will be days with patients where it is better to not introduce more trauma and more thrusts for that given patient. And so again, this is a slide that's worth reviewing. multiple times for any practicing chiro, right? And really honing in on your adjusting skills. 200 a week or 500 or more is a mentality. Does it permeate amongst every staff member? Do we have visualization representations? So I spent a lot of time last week in Bolivia. And so Bolivia is a separate South American culture from any other country. And one of their customs is they make a vision board out of small miniatures. And so like students will have a small miniature diploma, or if you're looking to buy a car, you have, a small miniature car or a house or a spouse or a vacation or whatever. And I, little tokens, and like you'll go to kiosks around the city and you'll see that they sell these by the hundreds. And so I like it. And, but, just having a picture vision board, I think it also could be good. What's your token for 200 a week? How do you disseminate that amongst your team? Or if it's 500 a week or 700 a week? And how can we create that mentality for each staff member every day? Think about the power of that. Having a full team focused on your next volume goal every day in practice, right? Specials, again, 30-minute chunks to have 6 or more a day. So they need to be complete and done within 30 minutes. A day 1 new patient, a day 2 report of findings, a re-exam report of findings, a graduation visit, a full reactivation visit, or 2 or more marketing new patients. Here's another great drill for the team and the doc, particularly the doc. 2 new patients are in the office at the same time. How would you handle it? And once you groove that into where it's no problem, there is certainty amongst everybody that we can handle 2 new patients at the same time. What would happen if you had 3 new patients at the same time? How would you handle that? And I'm running short on time, but there's definitely ways to handle that I go over in other presentations. Build chiropractic education into your visit. Sorry about the background noise. And look for opportunities to have absentee consultations. So when you're talking about something like headaches, and the patient says, oh, my mom suffered from headaches for years, right? That's a sign that you have an opportunity for an absentee consultation, right? Can I ask you a few questions about it? How long has your mom had it? How bad? What she's done? Here's why I ask. We've helped, hundreds, thousands of people with headaches. Don't know if we could help your mom or not. Well, we determine that if I was able to examine her, and then you could have a couple of options, including bring her in on your next visit. Build in your 48 visit protocol into the first 48 visits. And so think about this morning or yesterday afternoon, how much education during regular office visits did you do? What piece of research? What do you do on visit 7? When do you talk about kids? When do you talk about asthma? When do you talk about sports performance? When do you talk about traumas? What's the message of the day? What's the condition of the month? Build it into your regular visit. Here's another important thing that sometimes we'll lose track of. Look to motivate your patients. Again, we want them to come for hundreds or even thousands of visits during their life, right? But it's human nature to quit. It's human nature to get out of pain, to be happy, to love you as the chiropractor and disappear, right? So how can we motivate? So look for progress, address progress, encourage the patient, be excited. A person on fire, people will show up to watch a person on fire burn. And so I'm not asking you to be a personality that you are not. I'm asking you to embrace your personality. How can you set yourself on fire in the name of your practice and serving your patients? Post-adjustment, whatever PT, rehab, or traction that you perform, again, can it be self-directed? It was transformative in my practice when I learned that I could teach patients to turn on intersegmental traction. It saved me 300 times a week from walking around my office to the other side, putting the headrest paper down and setting the timer. I just taught them on visit 2 after their first adjustment. Here's how you turn it on. When the bell rings, get up, throw your headrest paper in the trash bin, go out front. Normally, you don't even need to stop on the way out. However, today, Johanna will have some paperwork for you, right? If it needs to be staff directed, then make sure that we're documenting that and we have the notes for that, and to document the whole visit. And so it's another reason I like the paper travel card. I like to do the chicken scratch note on the travel card so that I can see 8 people in 30 minutes. When I have downtime, I might then take 20 travel cards and then transcribe it into my software. It's one of the things that I do not like about new software that requires the doc to do the full SOAP note during the visit, is that it slows down the visit and reduces the number of people that you can see in 30-minute chunks. Everybody can see more people at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock, but not everybody can see more people during prime time. And so if you can double during prime time, you can double your whole practice. Documentation, the full new patient, the daily SOAP note, all of our treatment plans, the x-ray report, any complicating factors, breakthroughs, setbacks, and all the re-exams. All right, lastly here is the numbers for the day. Again, until I know that you guys are focused on this, I had triplicate systems, a handwritten day sheet, the computer day sheet, and the sign-in page should all match the number of visits. The handwritten day sheet and the computer day sheet should match on production and collections and even write-offs if you do them on the handwritten sheet. Invariably, every single day, right, there would be errors. Somebody, that was in wasn't on, somebody was in twice, some service that was given wasn't recorded, some service was recorded that wasn't given. And so just the addition was wrong. And so we had this concept. I had a CA named Sandy. She labeled this, that we're laser. And so we needed to be laser before we left. In order to be laser before you leave, if you could be laser before prime time, your visits are all laser, your production dollar is all laser, your collection dollar is all laser. And then so when you go into prime time and you see 18 more people, if there's an error at the end of that, you know that the error is just in those 18 people, right? And my staff, they both were trained, but I guess I hired this way. If they were off, even by $5, they would go crazy and they would find it. And then we were laser and then the day was over. Prime time, again, back to back to back, typically 4 to 5:30, 25 or more in 90 minutes. Again, if you can increase prime time by just 30%, you can increase revenues by 50% and profit by 100%. To think about that, right? If you're eating your prime time without maximizing the number of people that you're seeing, it's a mistake. The patient exits, so on regular visits, they do not stop at the front desk, they do not pass go, they do not collect $200. They wave, we acknowledge them on the way out, maybe a see you Wednesday. If they denied rehab or surgery, like we fixed the charges for the day. There are people that have to stop. We kind of want to retrain them to not stop, but a handful will have to. That's different than lingerers. Anybody that's lingering, we should definitely educate and bring to the doctor, right? I might end up right at the top of the hour. Lastly, non-standard patient visits, right? The patient that has to ask a ton of questions, they're inappropriate dressed, it's their event for the day and they want to hang out for hours. They might be challenged mentally or in some other way where they can't receive the adjustment. And so we want to move those people out of prime time and we want to isolate them into the non-primetime times and also kind of have a red line of what we want to work with and what we do not want to work with and invite some of those people out of the practice, right? And so it is okay to do that. However, it shouldn't be every single patient. End of the day, final balancing, we enter the numbers into the spreadsheet, we file everything away, we clean out the trash, we reset the office, and, you know, re-hitting the vision statement for the day is a great end of the day statement. The last slide is chasing the last patient to the parking lot, right? And so, you know, you should not be in the office for 45 minutes after the last patient, particularly if you have a family. And so, you know, building in all of these steps during the day can help to reduce that. And again, I just want to finish on this consistency. And so having every patient, every visit, 40 to hundreds of visits per person, every staff member, respecting their time, their experience in the office, their financial commitment, and that we do not have negative surprises. We get the opportunity to ruin the relationship on every single visit. And so again, being aware that being able to hang all of our personal problems on the hook at the door when we come in, and they'll still be there at the end of the day. We can put them back on, but that we can be there, the whole team, to service each patient, each visit for a lifetime of visits. So your homework is to determine your algebra, to pick, you know, what are the easy lying steps to improve, to review your regular office visit, and how can you improve that? So I'm 1 minute past, but I want to stay on if there are takeaways, any shares from anybody that would like to, a takeaway from today, who would like to share? Dr. Jeremiah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think there's a lot of great information. You're not going to get me to go back to paper books, but I loved it when I used it. The scheduling with ours, like everything you said is accurate. However, it's just the way it is. It would synergize with the system. The calling feature is great on Platinum. I wish other softwares would include those so you have organization, especially with multi-docs of who goes where when. And then we're incorporated with Sked. So if anybody isn't using Sked and you have Platinum or ChiroTouch, Sked is super helpful for auto scheduling, changing appointments. Patients can change them on their app or schedule appointments. They cannot cancel them. And also text messaging, and they sign in with that. So it allows to synergize with your one-stop front desk concept, because they come in and check in with a barcode on Sked, and it only stops them if you have an exam or something. One of the things you said that I'm definitely going to review with my associates is be the doctor. I think a lot of associates have a hard time owning that, and not, I love the phrase of not fulfilling their own personal needs or for friendships or whatever, but just keeping it brief and appropriate. But I thought that was awesome.
Great, awesome.
Have that reviewed.
Dr. Fenn.
Thanks,
You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, definitely that. That's a big one to review with really me. I bullshit more than Shannon does, and just keeping that to a minimum. But even just opening the door, like when the meeting goes long and it's like 1 minute till, I'm dancing in my pants because I know everybody's dancing outside, and to make sure that we get our culture to when the door opens, like it needs to open 5 minutes early, 3 minutes early at a minimum, that we're ready to go. That way people are on the table. And the ones that don't warm up, we want them all to do their prehab. The ones that don't, jump right on the table. They're not waiting for someone to sit there and wobble while they just want to jump on the table and get on with their day. So just getting that down a little better.
Love it. Dr. Clay.
Yeah, it's pretty loud where I'm at, so I'm going to apologize, but I'd like to check out the scheduling. We're working on that right now, the regular day in practice of what we're doing with the primary times of 30 minutes. I'd like to see those 2 slides again, if you can send them to me. Because you had a good morning and afternoon. I tried to write it out. But good review. I mean, it's just so much information out of this video. Like I can watch it over and over and just, it never gets old.
Right, because you're focused on different things. And even if you heard it before, like your practice is now different now. Excellent. Roxbury, what do you guys say? What's one way to improve your regular office visit? See if they can unmute. Maybe not. Dr. Steve, world class. Either
World
by
class.
chat or by audio. All right. If not, all right. Everybody have a great week. And I will talk to you guys later.